Meanwhile, today the Supreme Court heard arguments in a very important political issue that could determine the balance of power in Washington. The case involves Speaker of the House Mike Johnson's state of Louisiana and the issue, Louisiana's voting map. In 2022, Louisiana redrew its voting map after new census data. The map determines how the state's 6 United States House seats are divided. Civil rights advocates did not like the new map. They said it violates the Voting Rights Act by diluting the power of black residents. A lower court agreed with the civil rights activists, so the Louisiana map was redrawn again. But then a group of Republicans and white voters challenged the new map. They said Louisiana relied too heavily on race when it redrew the voting line boundaries. Here are some arguments the court heard today, as well as a comment from a Supreme Court justice.
One argument is often, well, once you've found a Section 2 violation, you've got a compelling interest to go ahead and discriminate on the basis of race in your remedial map. And I'm just wondering, do you endorse that view or do you reject that view?
I don't endorse the concept of discriminating on the basis of race if discrimination has been established under Section 2 and a state determines that it needs a very precise incision of race in order to remedy that Section 2 violation, then Section 2 and this court's precedent supports that.
You could control for partisan effect. There was racially polarized voting even within the Democratic Party. That's where Section 2 matters, where you have a reason to think that a racial group is being treated.
Here too. You have proof of that here.
No, you don't. What you have here is that Republicans and Democrats are different. There's no.
You have some that even white Republicans or white Democrats won't vote for black candidates.
Right, but if these were white Democrats, there's no reason to think they would have a second district. None.
Professor Emeritus at Harvard Law School and author of The Preventive State, Alan Dershowitz, joins me. Good evening, sir. The issue here, the broader issue here is how much race could be used to draw these districts. Is that a fair description?
Yes, and back in the 1940s, Justice Frankfurter purposely and very, very correctly talked about the Supreme Court staying out of the thicket, the political thicket of racial gerrymandering and other forms of gerrymandering, because there's no neutral answer to this. This is not like college admissions where you can move to a meritocracy. And, we know what a meritocracy means, but you can't have a meritocracy when it comes to creating districts. Creation of the district either will help black people or will hurt, or will help white voters or will hurt them. There's no neutral principle. And I suspect the Supreme Court is moving away from focusing on race in the electoral context as well as in the college admission context. So if I had to make a prediction, I would predict that it will not do well in front of the Supreme Court. Justices Gorsuch are key votes in this, and I suspect we're going to see a lot less sympathy for creating legislative areas which guarantee black seats in Congress and in other elected offices. I think we're going to see a diminution of the sensitivity toward kind of creating affirmative action in legislative redistricting.
Is this thinking that, and I think that there's a shift away from this as well as time marches on, that African-American voters are Democratic voters. And for that reason is how you gerrymander is so that, it will control the balance within the House and the Senate, or the House at least.
Well, but, the Supreme Court has said unequivocally that the legislature can do whatever it wants to do in terms of helping Democrats or Republicans. They're going to stay out of the thicket of purely partisan politics. If you get a state like Texas, which says we're going to benefit all the Democrats, only the Democrats, the Supreme Court won't intrude. It's only when race matter comes into it. Now, as you say, though, race can sometimes be used as a surrogate for party affiliation, or party affiliation can be used as a surrogate for race. But, for example, if you had a situation in Alaska where there are not a lot of African-American voters, but there is a lot of dispute between Democrats and Republicans as to how districts should be drawn, the Supreme Court will stay away from that. The issue is whether party affiliation is somehow a surrogate for race. If it's not, the court stays away. If it is, then the court gets involved And what we're seeing is a shift in focus away from sensitivity toward creating balance in legislatively drawn districts. So I think this is bad news today for Louisiana and for the NAACP.
Well, we have 30 seconds left, but the other thing, too, is that we got the midterms coming up, so it'd be sort of a good idea if we knew how the districts were drawn.
Absolutely. These cases tend to come up right before elections, and they can be very, very disturbing in terms of the electoral process as well. So I think we're likely to see a pretty quick.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, as always, thank you, sir.
Thank you.